So, you want to complete Chapter 7 of Archero? Well, you've come to the right place. If you've watched my previous chapter guides, you'll find that this one is very different. I'll be guiding you through one of the hardest chapters of Archero. My goal here is to equip you with the necessary skills, knowledge, and strategies to increase your chances on beating Chapter 7. This was originally one video, but it came out to be an hour long, and a bit too jumbled up. So I've decided to make this into a 4-part guide. In the first part of this guide, we'll be going through things you need to know before you begin a run, level re-rolling, the deal with the devil, gear recommendations, and ability recommendations. In the next 3 parts of the series, we'll be dividing the guide into 3 videos covering every single boss for each section in Chapter 7. We'll be covering their strengths, their weaknesses, the best ways to beat the bosses, and on top of that, it will be with all of their variations. The reason why we're doing it this way, I want to make it easier to find instead of putting it into one video where you have to try and find the timestamps for it. If you didn't know, Chapter 7 consists of 12 bosses and 3 sections. There are 4 bosses in each section, but you only have to go against 3 of them. My name is Teeds, and I make many Archero videos from guides, tier lists, news, updates, and more. Please do subscribe and click the bell for more Archero content. Okay archers, grab your notebooks or something you can write all of this info down because you're going to need it. A little background information about myself: I've been stuck on Chapter 7 for 2 months and maybe a week. When I started this chapter, I was level 44. This was my gear. Now that I've completed this chapter, I'm level 54, this is now my gear, and no, I did not purchase any gems or chapter packs during the 2 months I've been grinding Chapter 7. This was just from grinding, daily and weekly chests, and saving up my gems. In the 2 months I've been grinding for Chapter 7, I've recorded every boss, studied their patterns, and found the best ways to defeat them. I'm finally ready to share this in-depth guide with you. Additionally, I couldn't have made it this far without the help of other archers in the Reddit community who have posted their own tips. Let's begin. So what should you know before starting a run in Chapter 7? In a majority of the levels, you want to get rid of the mobs surrounding the boss first. However, there are some exceptions, and I will speak about this in the boss section. You'll probably take a really long time to beat this chapter, and that's okay. It's frustrating, I know, but the more you play, the more you practice, and the better you get each run. This chapter requires you to understand stutter stepping, which basically increases your attack speed and damage for free. I talk about this in an older video. I will leave a link in the description box below if you're interested in understanding how to stutter step. Some players have recommended to exit out of the run if your first couple abilities are bad. I do not recommend this, because it's just wasted runs and wasted energy with no practice and no value. What you do get out of this if you choose to continue the run is more practice, more coins, and more chances for loot drops. However, if you do not have the time to do this, then I recommend dying on the first level so you can get the XP for that run. If you just exit the run, you don't get the XP, but if you die, you do get the XP. This is important because this contributes to your talents, which can increase particular aspects about your character in game, making it easier for you in the long run. And it doesn't matter how long the run is, the XP will always be the same. For Chapter 7, it is also recommended to have enough gems for a 30 gem revive. You might need it, you might not. With a gem revive, you want to use this on the boss you're most likely going to die to or a boss you're struggling with. Next, level rerolls. In the 1.1.14 update, also known as the Hero Mode update, boss rerolling no longer works. However, level rerolls do work. So in Chapter 7, there are 12 bosses in total, and the 1 end boss. With the 12 bosses, each of them have 5 variations with mobs, maps, or both. So for example, there's the skull boss with the archers, and there's the skull boss with the wolves. Now you might find one harder than the other. This is where level rerolling comes in. If you start a run, enter a level, see a boss that kinda makes your palms sweaty, then all you have to do is close the application completely, reopen the application, and resume progress. This will change the boss variation. You can keep doing this until you land on a variation that you're comfortable with. There is a con to this though. One of the things that can happen if you do this is that you may lose an ability from the wheel. So all of you should know that after you beat a boss, you get a wheel. This wheel has a chance of dropping XP or abilities, and if you get an ability, no matter how far you are in the chapter, you may lose it if you choose to reroll a variation. I don't do this personally, but the option is there. Next, the deal with the devil. The devil has probably shown the most importance in chapter 7 than any of the previous chapters. So basically, the devil pops up if you take no damage from a boss fight, and sometimes it comes up even if you do take damage. The boss takes roughly 20% of your health, so it's a pretty hefty amount for a chapter that requires a lot of health in my opinion. The devil offers quite a few abilities, however, the ones I will tell you to focus on are extra life, multi-shot, and front arrow. I would say ignore the other abilities. I don't think it's worth it in this particular chapter as you're gonna need the health. The important thing here is that if you do opt for the devil, you won't get the wheel. The wheel is super important as well as it may give you free abilities or even just the XP, which you're going to need. So if you don't have any health to spare or you want to opt for the wheel, make sure you take damage from the lowest source of damage possible. I would recommend taking damage from one of the mobs where possible, but they're most likely going to be dead. In most cases, I recommend taking damage around the time you're about to defeat the boss as you're less likely going to take more damage than necessary. Next, gear recommendations. For this chapter, I recommend grinding for at least one epic weapon. If you're lucky and skilled enough, you may be able to pass it without the use of epic gear, but the odds are against you. Don't forget that the leveling up also grants you a talent per level, so this is a great way to boost your stats as well if you're lucky. A little reminder, this is what I started with, this is what I ended with after completing chapter 7. For armor, I recommend the Vest of Dexterity. For rings, I recommend 2 Serpent Rings. This will stack up the dodge rate, which is the most viable and strongest stat in Archero. If you don't have Serpent Rings, I recommend the Bear Rings. This is because the Serpent Ring's bonus damage to range does not apply in chapter 7, as the bosses aren't considered range or melee. However, they are considered ground and flying, so the Bear Ring's bonus damage to ground targets, which most of the bosses are, will apply here. For pets, I recommend 2 laser bats. If you don't have 2 or you don't have any, I recommend the Fairy Elves, and then after that, the Grim Reaper. For weapons, I recommend the Tornado and the Death Scythe. These 2 weapons are 2 of the strongest weapons in Archero, with the Death Scythe taking the top spot for most chapters. First, let's talk about the Tornado and why it's good for chapter 7. The Tornado is a fast weapon that acts like a boomerang where it returns to you, damaging everything in its path and on its way back. It has a built-in piercing effect and return damage. With its epic form, it will deal increased damage when it returns. Because of the 2 additional effects of this weapon, it really helps with the lack of abilities you receive in chapter 7. Now, the Death Scythe and why it's good for chapter 7. The Death Scythe is considered the best weapon in the game, but is it the best weapon for chapter 7? It's really hard for me to say. Other players have mostly recommended the Tornado for chapter 7, however I've used both of these weapons quite frequently during my runs, and I have to give it to the Death Scythe. I might be a bit biased because it is the weapon I actually completed chapter 7 with, but it's also the weapon that I've had the most success with. The Death Scythe is a slow moving weapon that deals a lot of heavy damage. Pair this up with Stutter Stepping and you're dishing out a lot of damage, especially on a chapter that is very single target heavy. With the epic form of this weapon, it offers a high chance to kill mobs with less than 30% HP. So this stat is actually pretty useless in chapter 7 as this does not affect the bosses. It also doesn't affect the mobs unless they have a health bar above their head. The Death Scythe has a knockback that can assist you with some bosses, especially the melee ones. Skeletons, I'm looking at you. With the heavy damage, and if you're pretty solid on abilities and gear, you can take out the surrounding mobs pretty quickly, and I'm talking like 2 to 3 shots for some of the earlier ones. In the end, with these 2 weapons, it's up to your preference. You can beat the chapter with either of them. If you don't have either of these weapons, don't worry, you can still beat the weapon with a bow or with a saw blade. And last but not least, ability recommendations. With abilities in chapter 7, it's more important than ever to always pick up the most useful abilities because you don't reach max level in this chapter. As I said earlier, you may only reach level 5, 6, or 7. Due to this, you won't have max abilities like the previous chapters. These are the best abilities in my opinion for chapter 7. Extra life, an ability that you can get only from the devil, is always worth it. In terms of damage, multi-shot, the best ability in the game after extra life, front arrow, this ability comes right after multi-shot and together they make a killer combo. Ice swords, this ability was a game changer for me. I've been stuck on chapter 7 for 2 months, however maybe a week ago, I started frequently picking up ice swords. This ability really helps against some of the hardest bosses, and I will reference this ability later on in the boss section. Honestly, I'm not even exaggerating, but I think I beat this chapter due to this ability. And then Rage. This ability increases your damage based on how much health you've lost. Other abilities are Attack Boost and Attack Speed Boost, which both do well as well. In terms of survival, Slow Projectile. This ability slows all projectile type attacks from monsters. This can help against some of the bosses, however it can also make it harder. I'll reference this later as well. Wingman, one of the must-haves. This ability requires pets. Pets will take all projectiles in its pet's path, so it's a good idea to hide behind them if possible. Invincibility. This ability can save you at times you least expect it. It makes you invincible for 2 seconds and comes up roughly around every 9 or so seconds. Dodge Master, an underrated ability. If you're going all dodge gear, this ability and the other dodge ability is golden. Dodge Master gives you a higher chance to dodge attacks. Shield Guard, a bit like Wingman. This shield will take all projectiles in its path. You can even use this shield to purposely take out projectiles just by walking up to them and touching the projectile with your shield. HP Boost and Attack Speed Fury are pretty good as well. Abilities I would avoid are Bloodthirst, this ability does not do much in this chapter, and Smart. The XP is not even that much, and honestly, it's just a pretty bad ability in general. Other abilities that can help you with mobs, Ricochet. Since we deal with a lot of mobs in this chapter, Ricochet can take the pressure off. However, if you're running with a tornado weapon, I recommend avoiding all of these abilities: Ricochet, Piercing, and Bouncing Wall. This will counteract the bonus damage of Tornado as it will not return straight to you anymore. With all the abilities I've listed, I highly recommend to always pick up Slow Projectile and Wingman where possible. These 2 abilities really help with the end boss and a lot of the bosses in between. And that is all for everything you need to know before adventuring out on your quest to complete chapter 7. Remember, I will be making 3 more videos guiding you through every boss in this chapter. It will be divided into 3 parts, each part focusing on one section, which will focus on the 4 bosses from that section. Please do subscribe and click the bell to be notified for more Archero guides, tier lists, updates, and much more. And not to mention the guides for the bosses of chapter 7. A like and comment would be super rad, and I thank you very much for watching. I hope to see you again. Bye!